you off guard with this question. And welcome back to the Common Sense Club. I'm Gene Grainer. I'm in for Scott Hannon today. And our next guest, we bring on North Dakota Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem on the legal arguments for a state case against the EPA's regional haze regulation. And welcome. Good morning this morning, Wayne. Welcome on the show.
Good to be with you, Gene. Good morning.
Well, bring us up to speed. What is your office doing in regards to any potential hazing regulations, or will there in fact be any regulations from the EPA based off of the overwhelming presentation last week against any type of ideas at the meeting?
Well, I'm never very optimistic that the EPA is going to reverse its course based only upon common sense and the law. What this particular issue has to do with is what's called regional haze. It's not an issue of safety or public health. It's an issue of what are the particulates in the air that you can actually see. The Federal Clean Air Act requires that over the course of the next 50 years or more, states show that they're making reasonable progress towards certain improvement goals. North Dakota worked diligently over the last 4 years to come up with its own plan. The EPA, however, came in and said the state's plan is not good enough. They have a much more expensive and much less effective plan that they have proposed. And what they're proposing to do is to usurp the authority of the state of North Dakota to adopt its own plan. This, I think, and here's where we get into the legal argument, I think is contrary to what the Clean Air Act requires. The Clean Air Act says that air pollution prevention and control are the primary responsibility of the states, and it calls for the states to play the lead role in designing and implementing the regional haze program. Now, Gene, as you know, here in North Dakota, we have some of the cleanest air in the country. We are one of a handful of states that meet all the national ambient air quality standards. Even the the American Lung Association said that North Dakota has very clean air. In fact, they said last year that Mercer County ranks in the top 25 cleanest counties when it comes to air. And there are over, 3,000 counties in America. Yes. And Mercer County is the home to several lignite-fired power plants. The top three cleanest counties is Billings County. That's the home of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. So we in North Dakota are doing a lot, and we're doing it well. What the federal government has now done, and what EPA is proposing to do, is to come in and take over our regional haze program with technology that the experts say won't work, and at a cost that is enormously expensive. Their plan would call for an expenditure of at two plants alone, of about $700 million just for regional haze control. But the scientists and the technologists who actually are in charge of constructing and implementing this kind of control tell us they will not guarantee that it will even work. So the state came up with its own plan that doesn't cost $700 million. It would cost somewhere around $40 million that industry is fully on board with and are prepared to spend, that will provide the same kind of improvement in regional haze and do it at a far less price. The difference between these two plans, the one that costs $700 million and the $40 million state plan, is one that all of the scientists say will reduce the federal plan, will not provide any discernible difference between its plan and the state's plan. The human eye cannot detect the difference between what the state proposes to do and what EPA says we need to do at an enormous price.
Well, do you think there's some misinformation of some people when they go by these plants and they see the clouds above them, that they don't realize it's all water vapor? I
think that might well be correct. But, of course, for the regional haze, the area that we're supposed to protect is Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And if you look at those clouds of vapor, they go east because that's where the prevailing winds are in North Dakota. And they aren't affecting any visibility requirements at the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. That's why Theodore Roosevelt Park was ranked as one of the three cleanest counties in the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, if the EPA, as you say, you fear logic never rises to the top there, moves forward the regulations, are you preparing arguments? What kind of arguments are you preparing?
We certainly are because the EPA has failed to consider those things that federal law and state law requires that they do. And those factors that they're supposed to have considered but didn't include what technology is available, what is the cost of compliance, what technologies are already being used at the plants, how long is the plant going to last, that is, what is the useful life of the source, and how much improvement are we actually going to see. They didn't consider any of those things because if they had, they would not be seeking to overturn the state's regulations. This is not an issue of power plants that are saying we're not going to do anything, that we're happy with things the way they are. They're willing to spend a considerable amount of money, but they need to spend it in a reasonable, scientifically based, and economically sound way. And I think that the state plan is one that is supposed to be given primary consideration, and if we have to go to court, we will. And I think that if we do go to court against the EPA, ultimately we will be successful.
Wayne, I'll probably kind of catch you off guard with this question, but if I was the governor of North Dakota, what would keep me up at night is thinking about the EPA all of a sudden ruling against fracking, that they want to look into it. Have you at the Attorney General's office had in the background a working thought of what you would have to do if all of a sudden the EPA woke up to fracking's no good?
Oh, absolutely. We're concerned about that too, and that is one of the things that EPA is doing that keeps me awake at night as well, because if fracking were to be curtailed or eliminated, that would also eliminate 90 to 95% of the oil development in North Dakota. That's an essential ingredient in our development of our oil resources here in North Dakota. Without it, it would not be economically feasible. That is something that we're getting ready to go on. We've got already 8 lawsuits against the EPA. The one on regional haze is one of the most egregious, but also one of the most current, I guess, and that's why we're paying so much attention to it. But we have other litigation against the EPA, and if a fracking rule comes up that usurps again states' authority to make a determination, then we'll be ready to proceed on that if we have to.
So just
we have an agency, Gene, and I guess it's no surprise to most people that is not responsive to federal law or to the elected lawmakers whose job it is to set the policy around here. That's a real concern, and they ought to be, in my view, they need to be reined in, and they need to be following the law.
For those of us that are illiterate to timelines, and I've got about 30 seconds left, if the EPA ruled on hazing, how long for them to, would this be held up in courts for quite a long time and the status quo stay in place? Or does something have to happen?
The rules, of course, are in the comment period. We had the first hearing here in North Dakota last week. The public comment periods run through November, but the new rules would be in effect somewhere around the first of the year. And if that happens, of course, we would proceed into court, try to get an injunction against implementation of the rule. Whether we would be successful on that, I don't know. If we're not, then the price tag.
North Dakota Attorney Wayne Stenehjem on the EPA. This is the Scott